Okay, that's good. Okay, my name is Shibomi Plumter. I serve on the board of the Nigeria Center. I'm going to put on my video so that for those who don't know what I look like. So I'm going to do a brief introduction of the Nigerian Center. Hopefully for those who are not here yet, you'll be able to watch the recording. Okay. Now, what is the Nigerian Center? This is
My name is Benga
I
Agunjimi,
hope you can hear the sound.
and I'm the founder and executive director of the Nigerian Center. The Nigerian Center is the very first Nigerian American immigrant and community center. While we are called the Nigerian Center, we serve all minority and all immigrant groups in the United States. In many immigrant communities across the country and around the world, whether they're Chinese or Jewish or Latinos or even Ethiopians, there is an actual location members of those communities can walk into to support the American dream and American experience. While the Nigerian community individually has prospered, we now have an opportunity as a community to have our own Nigerian Center.
I am most excited to be a part of the Nigerian Center because we are a resource hub. And we know that while a lot of Nigerians we may know come into the country and they have a connection here or there is a huge population that don't have access. I can speak to thinking about maybe 30, 40 years ago when my parents came to the country. And while my dad came to the country through education, my mom came through a lottery. And when she got here, she had to go do things the regular way. You know, she came in New York, hustled, worked at McDonald's for like 2 weeks. And from McDonald's, she started getting, you know, other menial jobs before she was able to meet my dad. They got married, they had children. My mom didn't go back to school until she was like 40 to finally start her career. And I know that if there was something like the Nigerian Center, she could have been afforded opportunities, access information on how to go to school or how to start her own business if that's what she wanted to venture into.
I remember my uncle, I think I was like 10. He got deported. I haven't seen him in years because he can't come back in this country. If he had had the resources that the Nigerian Center offered, maybe it would be a different story.
As a pastor, and I can speak confidently for the church community, a lot of pastors struggle with the kinds of immigration challenges that their members are having. And sometimes when we pastors meet, we joke about the fact that there's this thing that is, you know, the don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. A principle that most Nigerians are engaging in. They don't tell you what they are going through. Some of them are dying in silence. By the time they speak up, sometimes it's too late. And I know that as a pastor, you know, the Nigerian Center will have come handy in helping people to know what is right, having the right information, speak to the right attorney, have right representation in court, and just to make the journey easier and smoother in the United States.
People come here from different paths, and for the same main reason is to get a better life, a better situation for their family. So there are numerous ways, there are numerous paths to the United States and to citizenship. So we help people with family-based immigration, employment-based immigration, asylum, refugee cases, student visas, pretty much everything that the law allows us to assist people with the process in immigration.
You know, just having this center here, you know, is just people identified that looks just like us, who we can get the resource from. I mean, this is something that even me as a grown-up young person just wanted to come. I wanted to know that it belongs here. I'm just happy that this is here. I wish that my mom and dad, you know, they were still alive to like witness this experience.
From the time my parents came from Kenya, they immigrated to New Jersey, and that's where they actually met. It took years for my mom to find employment. My dad has stayed at the same job for 25 plus years in fear of not being able to find other employment. Not even that, being able to purchase a home, it took them 25 years to buy their dream home. Having the healthcare aspect and having health insurance for my siblings and I. Nigerian Center is providing a service from all crosses across the board for immigrants.
And Nigerian Center provides opportunities with immigration and naturalization, provide home ownership opportunities, access to capital, language classes, and cultural programs.
Learning about the Nigerian Center was a godsend. You know, growing up, I used to think about how we can share our experiences and our culture. And oftentimes, Nigerian people are so interested in giving back, but there are few opportunities and motives to do so. So when I heard about the Nigerian Center, it just clicked. We're talking about home ownership, we're talking about financial literacy, we're talking about immigration services, not only for people from our background diaspora, but for everybody else as well can gain from it. I see the Nigerian Center not only as an opportunity to celebrate our culture, but to also share it as well.
I welcome you to be a part of the journey and to be a part of the experience. Welcome to the Nigerian Center.
Okay. So in summary, the purpose of the Nigerian Center is to provide connection, not just to the Nigerian culture, but also the wider African cultures. It's a very inclusive community. It's also a very trust-based community. So for a lot of people who, anytime you hear, either Africa or Nigeria, because we have a lot of baggage we're coming with, it's sometimes difficult to trust, but I want to assure you that the Nigerian Center is a place of trust. When you look at the quality of the boards, the quality of the people that work with the Nigerian Center, also its antecedents, you can be rest assured that it's a place of trust where you can come, with whatever you're going through, whether it be immigration-based or just cultural, if you're looking for that cultural connection and community. At some point, we're going to talk about some of the upcoming events, as well as ways you can get involved. So really, if this seems like the kind of place that you would want to connect to, either as a volunteer, as a donor, as just to even to provide advice, to provide feedback or professional services, I would encourage you to go to the website, nigeriancenter.org/serve, and you will find all the resources and all the information that you need to serve. We're also looking for partners. So if you happen to play a role in your community, you happen to have, links to resources that might be useful, not just to the Nigerian community, but also the African community at large. We also encourage you, please, visit our website as well to get all the resources that you need. And finally, please follow us on social media, talk about our work, share the things that we share on social media across Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. The reach that you provide goes a long way. We have speaking opportunities as well. So if you feel you have a message that you want to bring to the Nigerian or African community, this is also the right place for you, both online events as well as in-person events at the center. So we welcome you. And again, the resources are on the website. If you go to the website, you can indicate a desire to participate in speaking opportunities. And I would be remiss not to talk about donations again, because the Nigerian Center is a charity, a registered charity, so you will get tax deductions for your donation. So please donate. A lot of the work is done by volunteers, and we do provide value. So if you can set up a recurring donation, no matter how small, please go ahead and donate. And I think that is it for my introduction. I'll hand it over to the staff and volunteers at the Nigerian Center to take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. April, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
All right. So while I once again figure out how to share my screen, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an immigration attorney. I've been working in immigration for the past 12 years. Before that, I did insurance defense. So two completely different practice areas. I'm much happier to be working in immigration, where I focus mostly on humanitarian relief. So humanitarian relief is going to be your VAWA, asylum, U visa, T visa, anything where you're a victim of criminal activity, either in your home country or the US. But I also do crossover into employment visas for national interest waivers and some other applications as well. So today we're going to be talking about waivers, immigrant and non-immigrant waivers, mostly immigrant waivers, because mostly we're looking at people who are applying for green cards, which is also residency, or people who have residency, but they're at risk of losing it because of some issue that occurred. Normally that's a criminal conviction, and waivers in that case can help a person overcome an admissibility issue that would keep them from either obtaining their green card or keeping their green card. So the first thing that I want to talk about is just very briefly, let's talk about criminal convictions and immigration. There are two major things that you want to think about when you think about criminal convictions. One is that expungement is irrelevant for immigration purposes. So sometimes people will have a criminal conviction and they think if I just get it expunged, it won't matter. For immigration purposes, it still matters. They will still look at your criminal history when making decisions on whether or not you can become a resident or become a citizen or retain your residency. Expungement is only useful in the case of an employer that's looking at your criminal record. But for immigration purposes, it's completely irrelevant. And the other thing that's really important is that marijuana is illegal. Because people live in states where marijuana is legal, it gets a little bit confusing for immigrants because it is federally still illegal, and immigration is federal policy. So despite what's happening in your state, if you're an immigrant, you still cannot legally use marijuana, or it can have major consequences on your status. The other thing that I want to clarify really quickly is what is immigrant versus non-immigrant. So an immigrant visa is one where you're seeking residency, and there are multiple pathways to seek residency. So it could be VAWA, cancellation of removal, you want asylum, and now you're applying for residency, a family member petitioned for you, and now you're applying. All of those are immigrant visas. All of those are pathways for residency. Non-immigrant is when you're applying for a temporary stay in the United States. So that's going to be a F1 student visa, an H1B, anything that is temporary in nature, J1, B1, B2. So now that we've made that distinction, let's very briefly touch on just one of the non-immigrant waivers. So that's 212D3. So if you are applying for one of those non-immigrant waivers that I just mentioned, but you have an issue in your past that might keep you from obtaining that visa, this waiver might apply to you. So this waiver is for people who have a prior overstay in the United States, but they're back now in their home country. If they've been found to have participated in fraud, in prostitution, aggravated felonies, some drug crimes, this might be eligible for you, an option for you. So you'll be applying for it at your consular office at the consular interview, and you just apply with a written brief and supporting evidence. Now, if you're in the US and you're applying for a change of status, say you're applying for, you were originally on F1, and now you want to apply for J1 or B1, B2, then you use the form I-192. So just very brief overview of that. Oh, and what is the supporting evidence? So you have to include supporting evidence for this application, for this waiver. Your supporting evidence is going to depend on what you're requesting. So just for example, if your prior overstay, let's say you came in on a B1, B2, you overstayed by a month, and then you're back in your home country now. and they told you when you left, your B1, B2 is canceled because you overstayed. Well, now you want to apply for a new one. If you stayed in the US over that time because you had a sick relative and you were staying because you wanted to help take care of them, well, you need to present evidence of that. And that could be their medical records, a statement from that person. If you overstayed because you yourself were sick, well, you need to present the evidence of that. So based on the reason why you're filing the waiver will dictate what kind of supporting evidence you need. Okay, so now let's move on to the immigrant waiver. So these are the waivers where you want to apply for residency, you have a pathway to apply for residency, but you have an inadmissibility issue to overcome. So the first one is going to be the 212A1 health waiver. So this is if you have been diagnosed with a communicable disease, or if you do not want to take a vaccination that is required, this is the waiver that you're going to file. In this waiver, you have to prove what measures you've taken to confine your own illness, to take care of your illness, and also explain how you intend to prevent other people from obtaining that illness from you, since you're not going to be getting vaccinated. The next one is the 212A9A or C. This is when a person has a removal order, this is the waiver that they want to apply for. So let's talk about some scenarios to make it more concrete. By the way, I didn't mean to go further, but if you have a question at any time, then just, you can just interrupt and let me know, because we could be cozy here. It's just a few of us, okay? So the second one, let's say you entered the US on a student visa, F1, but you did not attend school. Something happened, your funding fell through, you didn't attend school, and so now you've received a notice to appear in court, in immigration court, because you are no longer in lawful status. You're afraid to go to that court, and so you don't go, and you're issued a removal order in absentia. Basically meaning that you failed to appear, so now you're ordered removed. If you come in contact with ICE agents, then they will remove you from the country. However, after all of that happened and you stayed in the United States, you've now met a wonderful person that you're going to marry, and that person is a US citizen. Well, you have a pathway because you had a lawful entry. You have a pathway to obtain residency, but this removal order is in your way. So at that point, you have the option to file this 212 waiver, okay, to waive that removal order so you can proceed with getting your green card, your residency by marriage, okay? If I confused you at all, just let me know and I'll go back and explain that. There is another option in that scenario of filing a motion to reopen. So there's a lot of times these waivers will have different options available, so that's just one scenario where it might be applicable. The next one is a fraud or material misrepresentation waiver. There are several different fraud waivers. This one in particular, the 212I, applies to people who are consular processing. A common scenario that you would see in this case would be, let's say I applied for a B1, a visitor's visa 5 years ago. And at that time, I was single, but I thought that if I put on my visa application that I was married, that I would have a better chance of my application being approved. So I put fraudulent information on that visa application. Well, now all this time has passed. Now I truly am married, and my spouse, who is a US citizen, would like to file a petition for me. Well, not only do I have to prove that I was actually single at the time that I wrote that, I also need to request this waiver for my fraudulent representation in that visa application. Okay, so that's a scenario where you would use this kind. The next one is also a fraud waiver, but this one is for a fraudulent marriage. So the specific scenario where this waiver would come into play is in an I-751 petition to remove conditions. So let me go back and explain that. when you get married to a US citizen or resident, if the marriage is less than 2 years when you receive your residency card, you only receive a 2-year conditional residency. However, if the marriage is over 2 years when you receive your residency, then you get a 10-year permanent card. Okay. For the people who only receive the 2-year residency, they have to file an application at near the end of that 2 years called an I-751 petition to remove conditions. Then they can go from the 2-year conditional residency to the 10-year residency. However, if in that time it has been discovered that the marriage was actually fraudulent or you entered into it for purposes that were not just love, for immigration purposes, but you would suffer harm if you were forced to return to your home country, you can ask for a fraud waiver on the marriage. So long story for me to explain how you use that waiver, but that's basically it. And then there's the I-93 waiver for returning residents. So this is a situation where you are already a lawful permanent resident, but you left the United States, okay? And now you've been out of the US for a year, 2 years, okay? So you've overstayed the amount of time that you can be outside of the United States and maintain your residency. So you have two options in that case. You can file what's called an SB1 at the consular office, and you can wait for them to approve you to come back to the US. Or you could just get on a flight, go to the airport, and once you arrive in the US, you file this I-193. Once you arrive, they're gonna say, hey, you've been out for too long, what's going on here? And that's when you would present the I-193 along with the filing fee. And that officer will have the ability to make a decision whether or not to grant it. So that is another option. And we're just going to go through a few more waivers. Let me just stop for a second. Does anybody have any questions, or is there anything that I didn't explain very well? Because I can't see the chat. So if you're putting any questions in the chat, I won't see it until I stop screen sharing. Okay. So the 212C waiver is for people who are also already residents and they have some criminal conviction that would affect their ability to renew their residency or travel outside the US and return and remain residents. So this is the waiver that they can apply for. However, the 212H is for people who are not yet residents and they're seeking residency primarily through either VAWA or cancellation of removal, and they have criminal convictions. So VAWA is the Violence Against Women Act, and cancellation of removal is what people sometimes refer to as the 10-year law. So if you're applying for either one of those, but you have criminal convictions, which can include a CIMT, a crime of moral turpitude, or prostitution, marijuana possession less than 30 grams. Those are things that can be waived by the 212H waiver. I will give you a scenario where I used this with a case. This was a cancellation of removal case where my client had been convicted of domestic violence. And so she met all the other requirements for cancellation of removal. She had been in the United States for well over 10 years. She had a child. She had 2 children who were US citizens actually, but one of her children had spina bifida. And so she, had no issues clearing the hardship bar. But she did have a domestic violence charge against her husband, and they were still married. And so in addition to requesting the waiver, she also gave testimony in court about the event and about what she had done since the event to prevent it from happening again. So anger management counseling, having better communication skills, and so forth. All right. The 601A is one of the most common waivers. This is the provisional waiver of unlawful presence. It's it's less common dealing with the African population, because generally when people are coming into the US from Africa, they're coming with a visa. And this waiver is primarily used for people who arrive in the US without permission. So if you arrive in the US without permission, and you then have a pathway to obtain residency through a spouse or child or parent, this waiver can forgive you of that unlawful entry and your unlawful stay in the US to allow you to proceed to residency by consular processing. It is provisional though. So one thing to be aware of is, even if this waiver is approved, if additional facts come to light that weren't disclosed previously, they will revoke it. And I have seen that happen as well. One scenario where that happened is a client did not reveal to us that she had criminal history in her home country. So when she traveled to her home country for her consular interview, that came up in her interview, and the officer there revoked her 601A. So not only was she having to deal with the criminal history in her home country because she'd left before the case was resolved, she was also now outside of the US with no approval or no forgiveness of her initial entry without permission. So if you're going to apply for a 601A or any of these waivers for that matter, be sure to reveal all of the facts truthfully so that your attorney can best prepare you for what might happen. The I-612 waiver of foreign residence requirement corresponds to the J1 visa. A lot of times the J1 visa will have a requirement that after you have your time in the US, you have to return to your home country for, usually it's 2 years. That's because if the government of that country funded your education or your stay in any way, they want you to come back and contribute to their economy. However, you can waive that foreign residence requirement. The most common way to waive it is if you marry a US citizen and you want to allege, hardship, family unity issues. But there are special I-612 waivers depending on what area you work in as well. So if you work in a special STEM field, there may be a special I-612 waiver for you. All right, and the national interest waiver is special because the other waivers mostly focus on something that you did, for lack of a better word, wrong, like a criminal conviction or unlawful entry or something like that. But the national interest waiver does not focus on that at all. It's looking at people who are extraordinary in their field, in science and arts and math and in tech, so that those people do not have to have a job offer before they petition for residency. So just to back up a little bit, typically, if you're coming on an employment style visa to the US, you first have to secure a job. And then that job petitions for you, does all the paperwork for you. A national interest waiver is saying, is taking the position that you are so good in your field and you are so exceptional in your field that we can waive the requirement that you have a job offer first and allow you to proceed to residency and come to the US without that. So those are all the waivers that we're going to review today. There are several other waivers to be aware of. So if you find yourself in a sticky situation, be sure to have a consultation so that you can discuss if there are any options available for you, particularly before you accept any kind of plea deals. You need to be completely aware of what your options are before you admit to any criminal activity, because USCIS does not look at plea deals and say, oh, you only took that because you didn't want to have to stay in jail, you didn't want to have to go to trial. They take it for guilt. So you're not able to take a plea deal and then go to USCIS and say, well, I didn't really do that. I just took the plea deal because it was only 30 days I had to serve and then I could get out. They don't accept that. They take it for guilt. So before you accept any kind of plea deals in particular, be sure to have a consultation about what kind of effect that's going to have on your future status as an immigrant. It's also a good reason to go ahead and apply for citizenship as soon as possible, because there are penalties, especially concerning criminal activity for residents, that just don't apply to citizens. So resources that the Nigerian Center provides to assist you on your immigration path. We do free consultations every Thursday. We also do application and document review, and we can help prepare you for any interviews that are coming up. So if you just want to practice being asked questions and answering questions, we could do that. And that's very important in order to perform well in the interviews. We also have on the Nigerian Center website various state reports and evidence specific to Nigeria. So if you are applying for asylum, you can find good material there to help support your asylum case. And on the YouTube page, you can find previously recorded seminars on TPS, understanding how Congress works, work authorization, humanitarian visas. Anything that we've given a presentation on is recorded and put on the YouTube channel. So be sure to check there for anything else that you might need. And that is the end of my formal presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I will turn this back over to our staff.
Thank you so very much, April. I think that is it. We pretty much covered everything we have for today. We don't have any questions. Hopefully we'll have people catch up with the recordings online. Aldini, Talabi, do you have any questions before we call it a day?
Also, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel and you have questions, I do check it every once in a while whenever I do a presentation. So you can put your questions below, and I'll come below at some point and see your question, okay?
Okay, thank you, April. And thank you, everybody. On behalf of staff of the Nigerian Center, I want to appreciate our board member, Shubumi, for hosting us for this session. We are very grateful to you. We thank you for obliging us. And thank you, April, for the very, very enlightening presentation like you always do. Thank you, even though you're part of the family. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. Please follow us on our social media pages, catch up with our events, keep up with us on our website, and you'll get everything you should know about the Nigerian Center. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a beautiful evening. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.